Yeah, Sterling, do you want to kind of give us a rundown of your book, How Did We Get Here?
Sure, yeah. It's called How Did We Get Here? It was published last year through First to Knock, which is a small book and record publisher out of Chicago. Basically, it focuses on just the sort of cultural inroads that sort of lead us to the place we're currently at. Online obsessions, sort of like you said, zeitgeisty things happening within the culture. It's a little bit tongue-in-cheek. It's really short. It's about 30 pages. And the idea is that a sort of super terrestrial entity comes down to maybe point us out in a humorous direction, kind of where we've gone wrong.
Okay, and this entity is called the Void. Is that right?
Void, yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Void is perhaps a robot, perhaps an emissary of some sort of bureaucratic system of gods. It's all kind of loosely hinted at within the book.
Okay, where do you think we have gone wrong then?
Well, I break it down in 10 chapters in the book. I start with recycling. I sort of see recycling as a reactionary push toward a couple things that happened in the 80s. I outline it in the book, sort of humorously, all pinning it on a crime syndicate in New York that had a garbage barge out in, I think it was in the Hudson out in New York. And basically, they had this garbage barge because there was supposedly a shortage of landfill space. And it ended up getting incinerated. Because it was incinerated, New York instituted a sort of ad campaign for recycling, and then that led to many other states following suit. I talk a lot about specific instances sort of humorously, but that may point to larger things. Like I talk about the Strokes. I talk about the art world writ large, which is actually something I have a lot of familiarity with. I was loosely involved with the art world for a number of years, and sort of quit. This book is like a resignation letter to the art world in a certain way.
Did you see, Sterling, did you see a movie called Untitled with Adam Goldberg? It's sort of a satire of like the New York art world.
No. Actually, yes, I have. He's like an art critic, isn't he?
Yeah. Yeah, he has a brother who does like this really like banal art that like hospitals buy in large quantities to put to put in waiting rooms and that kind of thing.
Yes.
Yeah, it was I thought that was kind of good. I don't have any kind of firsthand experience though by which to compare that to reality. So I took that as a kind of at least somewhat accurate based on art school people in Northern California.
Sure, yeah. No, I mean, I definitely got a kick out of it. It's been a while though. I should revisit.
Yeah, it's from I think 2009, which feels like another country, honestly. At least when it comes to sort of comedy films. And when it comes to seeing a comedy film in a theater too, it feels like that moment has passed. We're in a kind of time of blockbusters only, and the kind of movie that Untitled is would probably go directly to streaming now.
Right.
I realize pivoting from sort of one subject to another, but yeah, so yeah, it came out around the same time as the last of the blockbuster comedies, circa 2010, Bridesmaids, The Hangover, things like that have sort of faded as kind of a mass phenomenon, and Heghoulian, I don't know if you're familiar with some of these really American, art media artifacts I'm talking about here, but The Hangover, I'm sure you've heard of.
I think I have heard of that, yeah, but it's not something I really got into at all.
Yeah. I can actually use that to pivot to the discussion because this movie, The Hangover, takes place in Vegas. I can use that to pivot to a discussion of the desert. And sort of literally, but also sort of philosophically, I tweeted something recently about, or from that podcast Hermitics, and he was talking about the concept of the desert in philosophy I know Baudrillard has discussed that. I'm sure it came up in that book, America. Do you have anything to say about deserts and philosophy in any sort?
Okay, I think so. Okay, my second piece on my Substack was about a line from Baudrillard's book, America. So the title of the piece was Notes on the Desertification of Signs and Men. So I talk a bit about that in the piece. What did he mean by that, or at least my interpretation? So I think Baudrillard saw, sort of in the 80s, really, that kind of process of desertification was taking place in, I guess, not only in the West, but I mean, globally, really, in terms of people kind of like becoming simplified, really, sort of losing their complexities, losing their depth. And this is also reflected in the signs around us, in the, sort of the symbolic dimension of the world that we live in. So, and of course, Baudrillard in America, he is obsessed with the desert. He uses the desert as a metaphor for. He uses the desert as a metaphor for America, in a sense that America is kind of. It's kind of a desert, yeah. He's kind of playing on this cliched view of many French intellectuals that America is a kind of cultural desert. Yeah, it has no culture. But Baudrillard sees that as rather positive.
Nothing true. Nothing really grows. No real culture grows. To sort of put it metaphorically, right?
Right.
Just as little grows in the desert, no true culture grows in America.
But he sees this as positive, really, and he talks about banality. And one of my favorite phrases in the book is apocalyptic forms of banality. So it's kind of like things have become so banal in certain ways that it's kind of bringing about a kind of end of things.
There's a kind of contradiction in terms there, right? Apocalyptic banality. Well, yeah. Apocalypse isn't particularly banal. It's extraordinary and outrageous.
Yeah, I mean, but you saw a kind of apocalypse in the what he calls the virtual, which we talked about before. I think in the first discussion we had. And the virtual is a kind of, as he says, secreted by the real, by kind of modernity, really, as a kind of self-devouring, I don't know, predator. So virtual devours the real. So we can kind of see that, I think, the way internet culture, internet existence has come to replace real existence. Really. There was that graph about showing how, sort of how did couples meet,
Yeah.
And you have all the other ways of meeting, the not online ways of meeting. So basically plummeting, meeting at work or meeting through family or neighbors and things like that. Meeting in nightclubs, and then meeting online is just, rising exponentially. So yeah, I think there's something in it.
There was that. Isn't there like a line in the film The Matrix that is directly lifted from Baudrillard? These were a character says to another, "Welcome to the desert of the real."
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was Baudrillard, but I think also Zizek said something about this too. So I don't know if that is directly from Baudrillard.
It sort of feels lifted too, because I remember that line felt like a sudden jolt into poetry in a way that everything else he was saying was a bit more straightforward. Take the red pill. You could see how deep the rabbit hole goes. I guess that's a little poetic, but that's a better understood, Alice in Wonderland. But then the desert of the real. Like, I heard that line in Matrix and I went, I don't quite get that, but
yeah. Well, There was a direct Baudrillard kind of reference in the film where Neo has a copy of Baudrillard's Simulations and Simulacra, but he keeps something in. I think a floppy disk.
I think it's his money box.
Is it money box? Right. It's a while since I watched it, but yeah, he's got that book, and the camera, kind of just picks up on it for a few seconds. But Baudrillard himself said he'd never watched the film. I don't know if that's true.
Yeah. The most recent Matrix was, when it comes to the notion of just cultural output just sort of being on repeat, that movie was the most self-referential thing I'd seen in a major film in a long time. I mean, it's just almost a total rehash of a total, trip down memory lane, trip down virtual lane of some kind, right? It's just, it looked slick, but it really brought nothing at all to the table as far as expanding on Matrix.
I couldn't bring myself to do it. I haven't seen it.
Yeah.
I haven't seen it either, to be honest. I sort of picked up on the kind of bad press that it got. And then it was a sort of a trans propaganda thing, But yeah, otherwise, I mean, I'm quite fond of the first one, and also the second one I think is kind of decent. The third one I found terribly boring. But yeah, I think as a kind of cultural phenomenon, it is very interesting. We get things like Red Pill and The Matrix.
It's fun. It's funny you mentioned trans because I mean, the obvious thing is the filmmakers are now trans and all that. But I mean, for years when people discussed that movie, no one mapped it onto the trans debate. It seemed to get something bigger, something postmodern. The desert of the real and the way that virtual reality is sort of superseding. Well, actually, I would say The Matrix is more like a sort of parallel reality in the form of the internet that you can escape to. That's somewhat a different concept than the virtual superseding the real. But in any case, for years, something that feels a bit sort of down to earth and extremely 2020s, woke issues and trans was not what anyone was thinking, for the most part, when they thought about that movie. It introduced the notion of red pill, which has much broader, more transcendent kind of meaning than just trans. So, but now that it's being brought up, it feels like you could sort of retrospectively look at it as some kind of big stealth vehicle for trans politics or something. But that's not how it seemed up until 5 minutes ago in discussion of that movie.
Yeah, I would say it's a classic case, a classic at this point, case of sort of current thingism comping itself on retroactively to history.
Yeah.
I mean, I would argue that the first film wasn't about that, just as you outlined. But we can retrofit all of our memories whole cloth, do it for you wholesale.
Yeah. Speaking of the virtual superseding the real, I jotted down a bit of a talking point here that I think ties into that, and that is the alleged decline of fashion. Real life fashion, something you consider when you're going out Friday night, or something you consider when you go to the office. That is in decline largely with the move to remote work, the move toward pod life, and to the degree that it still exists, it's sort of shoulder up oriented, right? Because it's mostly for being seen online, I think, more and more. Yeah. You save looking good, not for real life, but for being in front of the webcam. Now, that's sort of a very online thing to say. I know, like, for most people every day, it's nothing like that, but we're inching toward it. And Angela Nagel had a Substack piece briefly, fairly recently, about the decline of fashion. And I think it even shows up in the fashion industry, just not having the sort of currency and purchase it once had,
I could say something. I mean, you talked about pod life. I also maybe mentioned slob life. And I think this is the kind of dimension of nowadays, the culture nowadays is that there's a kind of undercurrent which says, looking after yourself, wanting to look good is somehow fascist. And there's this whole kind of development really of body positivity in the direction of saying, it's beautiful to be obese, and it's fine to just gorge on junk food and don't care really, not care at all. And I don't think that really goes with fashion. Fashion has always been a bit kind of elitist. And I think it should be elitist, really, because we need something to fire the imagination, to dream about. We don't want everyone to look like, it's a kind of like a Maoist idea, isn't it, that everyone should just look very plain and very dowdy. So,
yes, I hard agree. I was just thinking that like athleisure is also perhaps to take some of the blame here, because we live in, Byung-Chul Han says we live in like an aspirational society, an aspiration society, where like, in the achievement society rather, where we're all supposed to be these like aspirant, achievement-seeking subjects, and because of that, I think athleisure saw a rise because of that exact impulse, where we're saying like, I could literally be exercising at any point, so I have to have my like Adidas jumper and sneakers on at all times. And that's simultaneously aspirational, but at the same time does look like some sort of Maoist Cultural Revolution uniform or something.
Yeah, it's interesting how like these two sort of yuppie instincts to exercise and to be fashionable are sort of clashing in that instance, right? Like
Right.
I'm going with athleisure, yeah, because I could exercise at any time, but that also means I'm going with something that's easy, that I see sweatpants or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, athleisure. That's a fashion category, almost a genre, fashion category that didn't exist in the '90s, as far as I know. I mean, something that looked like it did, but as a kind of self-conscious category of fashion, I don't know if that was it feels fairly recent.
Living in Los
15 years.
Angeles, it seems to be like the de rigueur like uniform. Like everyone getting coffee has like the yoga fit on. It's kind of ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like I get embarrassed if I leave the house without all my clothes on.
Yeah, yeah. We're in a situation now where sort of all fashion of the last 30, 40 years kind of exists at once. There's no one thing really getting privileged. It's just be relaxed. If you're going to project a kind of aesthetic or image that is impressive, you do it in other ways, not how you dress to be seen in person.
Right. I think it's sort of seen as gauche now.
Yeah.
To dress up, or pretentious maybe.
Yeah, I was at a coffee place in like Frogtown neighborhood over where you're at.
Yeah.
You're at, relatively speaking. I'm in New Mexico right now. But yeah, and they were these women who I could, I'm going to assume they're, no less than middle class, probably upper middle class. And my own upbringing is, I know it because I'm sort of that too, sort of half upper middle class my own upbringing. I know the type. So they're sort of dressed down. And then when I was out in Miami, people who are solidly middle class or less would dress a bit better, actually. So it's sort of a counter signaling thing. And you could almost give away your true class pedigree by your body type more than how you dress. So, these women who are dressing down at the LA coffee shop, they are svelte, pretty lean, certain bone structure, certain good skin, all that kind of thing. This is almost getting very sort of lookist, fascist, reductionist. So I don't want to go any further on that, but.
There was an interesting little kind of spat on right-wing Twitter a few weeks ago between BAP, Bronze Age Pervert, and there was another account. He's some American, I don't know, he looks like a cowboy. I can't remember his name. But anyway, he
Sterling looks like a cowboy sometimes.
It's not Sterling though. Yeah, it's definitely not.
I play one on the internet.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But it was about this. Somebody was comparing the Calvin Klein adverts. So most recent one has got some kind of non-binary couple. One from 2017 or 18 has got a kind of overweight black girl in Calvin Klein's. And then, of course, in the 90s, you had Mark Wahlberg and Kate Moss. And I think what he was, this cowboy fellow was responding to another right-wing poster. This right-wing poster was saying what went wrong, with our culture. And then the cowboy guy said, the trouble with a lot of right-wing announcers, they don't know that the Mark Wahlberg, Kate Moss led to the other things. What you see in that image is a kind of early stage of what we see in the later images. Yeah.